Good evening, everyone. I am RCDSO Registrar and CEO Dan Faulkner, and with me today is the college president, Dr. Harinder Sandhu. Thank you for joining this RCDSO Connect session. We very much appreciate your taking time from busy schedules, I know, to hear directly from me and from Harinder and some other staff members on some very important topics. As always, our aim is to keep all of you informed. We will try to address as many of the questions you submitted through the event registration on cybersecurity and on cybersecurity and on our non-council committee appointment process. Before we get started, though, I would like to recognize the complexity and privilege of gathering online today by sharing a land acknowledgement. The RCDSO is on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. These traditional lands are known to some as Toronto. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples from across Turtle Island. This land is also part of the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty between allied nations to peaceably share and care for this land. We accept our responsibility to each other and this land, and we live and work on in a spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We are committed to actively supporting the necessary work towards truth, reconciliation, and equity. We embrace the role we play in regulating dentists, in protecting the public interest, and in strengthening our partnerships with Indigenous communities to advance access to safe and equitable oral health care. With that, I will hand things over to Dr. Harinder Sandhu. Dr. Sandhu, you are on mute, I believe.
With that, I would like to move to our first presentation of the evening. Auldwin Armstrong is the college director of IT. He is responsible for managing all aspects of IT service delivery, from developing strategic plans and related annual tactical roadmaps to managing IT operations. Auldwin will focus on the importance of reducing cybersecurity risk in your practice. No one is immune to this risk. We hope this presentation gives you some helpful practical tips and resources to mitigate this risk in your practices. Auldwin, over to you now.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Sandhu. Just getting everything set up. Thank you so very much for this opportunity to really engage and speak with everyone on the topic of cybersecurity. It is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And as such, we'll be going through a few things. We'll talk about some of the threats that we're facing globally, but we'll also then delve into some of the questions that were posed. I want to say thank you for everyone who submitted their questions. There were great questions, and as such, we want to spend a fair amount of this presentation addressing the contents of those questions. So, as I said, we're going to look at the threat landscape and what can you do on some of the other questions that you may have submitted. Cybersecurity is not just a technical problem, and this is a misnomer that a lot of businesses and organizations have. Cybersecurity is a risk issue. And in fact, based on studies, cybersecurity remains the #1 global business risk for 2024. And this is not the first time it was at #1 internationally. The reason for that is not just about the cost, but the disruption and the impact on the lives of both the organization and their customers. And so it's very important for us to treat cybersecurity not as an IT problem, but as a business problem. When we look at IT security issues throughout the year, we can see that IT security and cybersecurity threats happen to every organization, regardless of size, sector, how much they've spent on cybersecurity. As you can see, even the mounted police have had attacks against them. This is to say, as a practice, you can inevitably expect to be attacked or have some sort of cyber threat put upon you. So be prepared. Take a threat or a risk management approach when you're thinking about cybersecurity. As I said, a lot of people spend so much time looking at the technology that they fail to see that it is a business risk. And as such, a very similar approach to other business risks must be taken when you're addressing cybersecurity. Who are the attackers and why are they attacking? There's a lot of different individuals and organizations and groups that launch these attacks, and then they're considered threat actors, and they do it for a number of reasons. Some of them are geopolitical reasons, some of them are for profit, some of them are ideological. There's even some that are just discontented, and so they launch these attacks. Because of this, the type of attack, the number of attacks, when they attack, there's so many different ways and vectors, but it's important to understand that it's not just a single group that's launching these attacks. There's a number of groups for a number of different reasons that launch these attacks, hence why all businesses are susceptible to these attacks. The challenge, however, is that when these attacks happen, there's a cost to the data breach. As of 2024, the estimated cost per data breach is approximately $4.88 million. Now, this is incredible, and this is a global cost. However, it's important to understand that this fluctuates up and down in any given year. We're lucky that in Canada, we saw a slight decrease over 2023. However, globally, we saw an increase. So it's very important for us to keep an eye on the cost of a data breach, because this is a cost per a single data breach, not the total cost of all cyber events for the entirety of the year. So we're going to jump into the first Slido question. And for those of you who haven't had a chance, please make sure that you've downloaded Slido or visit slido.com. And the first question is, what is the top factor to reduce breach costs? We'll give you an opportunity to go ahead and answer the question. And once we get a few people in, we'll move forward. We're seeing cybersecurity training being one of the leaders currently, as well as encryption. These are all great choices, by the way, so please feel free to submit. We're about 42 currently. We'll move forward when we hit around 50. Please continue to vote. The numbers are still going to be available. Currently, we're looking at cybersecurity training as the #1 cost reducer. And in fact, that's true. Internationally, it's been proven that employee training on cybersecurity is the #1 factor in reducing the average cost of a breach. Now, the reason for this is manifold. And part of it is, it doesn't matter how much technology you put up front. If your staff are properly prepared, if your staff understands how to address a breach, you're able to minimize the number of breaches. You're able to expedite how quickly the staff are able to respond to these breaches, hence leading to a reduction in the average cost of a breach. So what are some of the threats that we're facing today? The #1 threat that we're facing today is something called business email compromise or account takeover. That accounted for approximately $2.9 billion in losses in 2023. So for those of you who don't know what business email compromise is or account takeover, this is when someone targets your organization and they try to get into your email system, they try to take over your account, and they try to use that account to then communicate with others within your organization, pretending to be you, and essentially exfiltrate money or other information from your organization. It is a very targeted attack. It's an attack that takes some time, but it's an attack that requires the threat actor to understand your business, which means it's also a very difficult attack to protect against. Another massive cybersecurity issue that's been facing us recently has been investment scams. And not surprisingly, one of the biggest drivers for this is cryptocurrency investments. Cryptocurrency investments made up approximately $3.96 billion worth of losses in 2023. Again, not a surprise, cryptocurrency is often very difficult to trace down, and as such, once an investment scam happens, cryptocurrency is very hard to recover as well. Now, that's the threats that we're facing, and we're going to get into the next piece, which is the questions you've submitted and what you can do to help combat this. And to do that, we're going to start with a question. Does each staff in your office use a unique login and password to access your systems today? So if you can go ahead and submit your questions. Again, once we hit about 50, we'll move forward. Again, this is anonymous, so we're not going to be pointing fingers after this. So we're right at 50. And I'm glad to see the number of yeses as high as it is. And I'll put out a bit of a hint there for later on in my presentation. It should be 100% yes. It's important for each person to have a unique password when accessing your systems. It's required for auditability, and it's required for cybersecurity as well, too. So we'll jump into the first question that we want to tackle today. What is currently the greatest cybersecurity threat to our office, and how do we most effectively guard against it? This shouldn't come as a surprise. But unfortunately, the biggest cybersecurity threat to most organizations is staff, your existing staff, intentionally and unintentionally. And the reason for that is cybersecurity is about people. It is not about the technology. It doesn't matter how many firewalls, antiviruses, or other security tools you put in place. If a member of your staff clicks on a malware or sends out the email and password to a sensitive file, they can circumvent a lot of those security controls. And as such, cybersecurity needs to be about people. And as such, the cybersecurity will not be able to be solved by technology alone. So understanding that the staff within your office is the biggest vulnerability you have today, spending time on addressing that is going to be critically important. So how do you do that? You do that by build cybersecurity awareness. You make sure that all the staff in the office are fully aware of what's going on within the office. They're aware of what threats are out there. They're aware of what to do when a threat does happen. They're aware of where to turn to, who to report to, and how to recover when something happens. Something else is, and this goes back to that Slido question, is passwords and sharing of passwords. Passwords should be treated very similar to how you treat a toothbrush. There's not a lot of people that would be comfortable sharing your toothbrush with somebody else, so you should never be comfortable sharing your password and login with someone else. And you should treat them very similarly. Don't share them. Make sure you protect them. Choose good ones. And every now and again, it may make sense to change them. I know that's debatable in the circle currently. Some people say don't change the passwords, just have a long password and multi-factor authentication. Some people say change them. I'm a bit in the middle. Change them. You don't have to change them every month, but change them every so often. Again, very similar to your toothbrush. Let's move on to the next question. What is the best way to secure data, especially these days when there are large staff turnovers? Again, we see a theme here where a lot of this is based on staff within your environment. And there's a couple of things you can do. Number one, you ensure that each person has a unique login and password. This is important, especially in an environment with large staff turnover, because each person then has their own login. If they leave, you disable that account and their access is restricted. When you share logins and passwords, it can be highly disruptive to go through every system and update those passwords. And if you're not doing that, that means someone who's no longer with your organization still has the ability to access those sensitive information using those older usernames and passwords. So that's why it's critically important that each individual has a unique username and password when accessing the system. Additionally, make sure they're not having administrative access with these accounts. If you need administrative access, Set up a separate account that's just for administrative access. That way, in case someone clicks on malware, it has limited impact. So make sure that they have unique usernames and passwords, and make sure that these accounts do not have full administrative access. The other thing you can do is ensure that staff is only given access to what they need. Too many times we think that it's easy to give access to everybody to everything, and it will be convenient for us. It's also very convenient to the threat actors. If they compromise the account of a secretary or a receptionist on the front desk, they can then get access to sensitive patient information if everybody has access to everything at all times. So it's important to ensure that staff only have access to what they need. We spoke about the other one before, which is conduct staff cybersecurity awareness training. Train is always the best way to go. Another piece that you can look at is backing up your records. And this one, I know that we speak about this in a few of our standards, but I cannot stress this enough. Backing up your records is critically important. We'll talk about cyber resilience a little bit later on, but we're in an era where it's not a matter of if, but when you will experience a cybersecurity event. Understanding it's a matter of when, you have to be able to recover these systems when this happens. And one of the best things to do is to ensure that your backups are kept safe, they're kept separate from your systems, and you understand who has access to them and who can delete or modify them. Another piece that we can look at for securing your environment is using multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is an extra layer of protection on top of your standard username and password. There are different types of multi-factor authentication systems out there. Some will send a text to your cell phone, some will use an app, some will use an email. People in the questions have asked what's the best one. The RCDSO doesn't recommend solutions necessarily, but we do suggest that you consult with your cybersecurity partner, and they will look at your environment and figure out what is best given your environment. And last but not least is ensure your systems are protected by security solutions. And that's plural. No single solution is good enough. You do have to look at a layered approach when protecting your systems, ensuring that you have a good endpoint protection. Traditionally, we call that an antivirus. Make sure that you're protecting your network, making sure that there are other protections out there, such as for your email and elsewhere. So ensure your systems are protected by cybersecurity solutions. So we'll move on to another question. What basic minimum cybersecurity measures do you recommend for small offices? And this is a great question. It's a question we get quite a lot from both the practice advisory team as well as in these Connect sessions that we've had. And again, it sounds like I sound like a broken record, but it's so important. Educate your team. Your team are the most critical piece in a cybersecurity event. So having them educated, having them aware of what to do and when to do it is so important. Additionally, control access to patient records. Do not share accounts to access your records and systems. You're accountable for who has access and when they have access and what they do with that information. So it's critically important that you do not share these accounts. Use multi-factor authentication. We spoke about that before. Back up your records. Again, we spoke about that before. But the other thing to remember is it's not just important to back up your records and your systems. You do need to make sure that you're testing these backups regularly to ensure that they can be recovered and that the integrity of the data is retained once they're recovered. So that is critical as well, not just backing up your records, but doing a test of the backups regularly to ensure that you can recover them and use them once they're restored. Another piece that is extremely annoying, and we acknowledge it, but it's actually very critical, is keep your software updated. Keep your Windows updated. Microsoft pushes out a patch Tuesday. Keep your Apple devices updated. These updates are sent out regularly. Don't be fooled by people telling you never have to patch an Apple device. That is a misnomer. Patch all your devices, all your operating systems, all your software that you're using. System updates are critically important because they often fill in the holes that are identified by these threat actors. And this is another way of ensuring that you're protected. We spoke about this before as well. Ensure that your system is protected by security solutions, endpoint and otherwise. Secure your network. Whether you like it or not, you're running a mini network in most of your offices. And while it's important for you to protect your endpoint computers and the servers, you have to understand that you're also running a network. And as such, you need to protect your network. You need to have intrusion detection systems and intrusion protection systems so that you know when someone is trying to get into your network, and ensuring that you are able to recover if you identify someone within your network. So ensure that you're protecting your networks within your spaces as well, too. Restrict access. And this goes through a number of points that we talked about. Number one, restrict access to the records that people can have access to, but also restrict access in that make sure that your folks do not have administrative access. With administrative access, I can circumvent a lot of security controls. So it's critically important that you restrict access to just the information that people need to have access to, and that they cannot make changes without you knowing. Develop an incident response plan. In the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a cyber incident, is not the time to be thinking, what do we do next? Have a plan, practice the plan, and train your team on the plan. The plan doesn't need to be difficult. The plan needs to be actionable. So have a plan and work with the plan. Monitor and audit your systems. Same way, you don't want people coming into your dental office just when they have a significant issue. You want them to come in for proactive treatment. Monitoring and auditing your system is a very similar concept. You need to make sure that you're keeping an eye on your system. Who has access to it? What are the attacks or probing attacks against your system? Make sure that any vulnerabilities in your space are identified and fixed regularly. At the college, we do cybersecurity assessments quarterly, both internal and external, and we also do audits. We recommend not necessarily the same cadence, but we strongly recommend that you do assessments, both internal and external assessments, to identify vulnerabilities. And this is important because if you don't identify them, you better believe the threat actors will identify them for you. And by the time they do, it's going to be too late. So ensure that you're monitoring and auditing your systems to ensure that you are taking the proactive steps to address those vulnerabilities. Secure your physical access. We live in a very digital space, but we cannot forget that we rely on the physical aspects as well. There's still a physical computer. There's still a physical monitor. Make sure that you're taking those precautions as well. You don't want your computer screen put up in a place where someone sitting in your waiting room can look at patient records on your computer screen. You don't want someone to be able to come in and just pick up a laptop and walk out of your office with it, because that laptop might have sensitive information. So it's critically important for you to secure that physical access as well. And something else that's been going around, and we definitely have it here at the college as well, but ensure that you review cyber insurance. Talk to your insurance providers, make sure that you understand what is right for you, what is the right limits, and what you need to protect your environment. And so that's a fairly hefty list, and we'll make sure that it's provided to you with this presentation. But those are some of the small steps we'd recommend to protect a small business. We'll move on to the next question. What is safer? Cloud-based or server-based, cloud-based servers or on-site servers? And the answer is really, it depends. It depends on your environment. Both cloud and server-based environments have pros and cons. From a server-based environment, you have more control over those systems because they're within your space. In a cloud-based environment, you get to benefit from the protection of a larger organization that has more controls in place. At the end of the day, regardless of whether or not it's on-site or in the cloud, you're accountable for your information. You need to know what information is stored where. You need to know who has access to that information and what to do if that information is ever corrupted, lost, or stolen. Regardless if it's in the cloud or on-prem, the steps are fairly similar. In fact, nowadays, most organizations don't go for a cloud-only or an on-prem only approach because it's very difficult. Most organizations tend to go for a hybrid approach where there's some elements in the cloud, email systems and so on, and some elements on local storage. So if there's a file that you don't want to have in the cloud, so think about it as not one versus the other. It's how can you use these to complement each other while ensuring that the security of both are put in place to protect your patient records. We'll move on to the next question. Does the documentation / information we need to collect for the CDCP makes us more targeted for cyber attacks? No. The challenge that we face within the healthcare sector is that we have the golden triad of all sensitive information. We have personally identifiable information. This is your name, your address, your date of birth, your next of kin, your emergency contacts. You collect that regularly. You have protected health information. I've just went to the dentist. They ask about your health, medication. All your health information is stored there. And of course, for treatment, there's a payment piece. So regardless of any additional information that you're being asked to collect, the information within your space today is highly sensitive and highly sought after. And that's one of the reasons why the healthcare sector is one of the most targeted sectors from these threat actors. Because with this information, I can steal anybody's identity and I can do a lot more damage with it. So you have highly sensitive information within your space. And so it's critically important for you to protect that information at all time. And no, the CDCP does not add additional complexity to it. It's just a different type of information within these three buckets. The next question, what are the minimum specific security protocols required for RCDSO cybersecurity compliance? What are the recommended ones beyond the minimum ones? And the RCDSO has put out a number of standards, but we haven't really put out a cybersecurity protocol standard because, quite frankly, it's not really necessary for us to put one out explicitly. There are a number of well-established frameworks and standards that are already in existence. And in fact, the RCDSO ourselves relies on some of these standards. We rely on the NIST cybersecurity framework as a guidance for most of our cybersecurity activities, our governance, our strategies, and so on and so forth. But NIST is only one of a number of standards. What you're seeing in front of you right now are 4 such standards. We have the Center of Internet Security, ISO, as well as COBIT. The great thing about most of these standards is that there's interconnectivity between these standards. And so it'll be easy for you to move from one to another and work with them as you see fit. The reason why the RCDSO went with NIST is because it was more straightforward. It didn't take a lot of technical information, and it presents cybersecurity in a more digestible and understandable means, as opposed to a more complex framework or protocol that's out there. The other thing that we recommend from the RCDSO is to embrace cyber resilience. And I spoke about this earlier. We talk about the fact that it's not a matter of if, but when. But it's nice to say that. But if we say it's a matter of when, then we have to be prepared. And cyber resilience is about making sure that you're prepared to recover when something happens. You know who does what and when. You know what you can turn on. You know what might be lost. You know how to communicate and who to communicate to for support. We're not expecting everyone to be a massive IT company overnight, but embracing cyber resilience allows you to be ready for these incidences so you can react and respond in a timely manner. And part of that is, as I said before, is having a response plan. And as you can see on the screen, it doesn't have to be difficult. You need to understand what you're doing to prepare for these incidences before they happen. You need to understand how will you detect and analyze these incidences when they happen. Because sometimes it's just an email that appears to be spam, but someone accidentally clicked on a link and all of a sudden your computer flicked the wrong way. Or all of a sudden you get an increase in spam. How do you understand that that's the precursor to a bigger threat? So making sure that you're prepared, understanding what is necessary to detect and analyze these, and then having a plan to contain and recover. And this is where the backups come in. How do you contain that threat? I can easily press a button and delete everything on the computer, but that's going to cripple your work. How do you recover quickly so you can continue to operate? And last but not least, there's always a post-incident activity. All of these incidences should be an opportunity for you to improve. It's inevitable that you're going to have these incidences, so don't be discouraged when you have a cybersecurity incident. Use it as a way to continuously improve your preparedness and your responsiveness to these incidences going forward. Just looking at the time, we're at 732, so I'm going to speed up a little bit here. What are the specific perimeters one should look for when shopping for cybersecurity services or programs considered to have adequate protection for healthcare applications? And the great news is you're not alone in asking this question. And in fact, the government of Canada has actually put together a guide for just such a question. And this is a great resource. For those of you who don't know, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is a phenomenal resource, and it's a resource not just for an organization. It has resources for individuals, large organizations, governmental organizations, and small organizations as well too. This specific article addresses what you need to look at when you're choosing software solutions for cybersecurity solutions for your environment, but also what to look at when you're selecting a cybersecurity partner to help you on that journey. So you're not having to guess at these. There are resources out there, some of them right at your fingertips. This Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is a great resource to go to visit, not just for this article, but many other articles as well. There's a lot more questions I'd like to get to, but I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to go through some general cybersecurity hygiene issues. And some of these are related to questions as well, but I wanted to make sure that these were captured. One of the questions that we tend to hear is, what do I do with the Wi-Fi in my office? Should I shut down Wi-Fi in my office? Should I have Wi-Fi my guests in the office? What's the big deal with having Wi-Fi in the office? And what's the threat? Having Wi-Fi in your office is, in and of itself, is not a big issue. The issue is when you have both your guests or patients and your sensitive information on the same exact network. The reason for that is anybody on that network have ample time to go through and then have access to your systems. That's not what you want. If you do go for having Wi-Fi available for your guests or your patients, make sure that you've separated them out into a separate network. Doesn't have to be separate physical network. There's logical segmentation that can happen so that it appears to be a completely separate network and they cannot access then the network containing your patient records. This is critically important if you choose to have Wi-Fi for your patients or guests within your office. Know where your records are stored. You cannot protect your records if you don't know where they're stored. A lot of people say, oh, I'm just storing it in the cloud. Okay. Where in the cloud? Where's this located? Who has access to it? They're your records. Regardless of who is managing them for you, they are your records, and you need to know where your records are stored so that you can take the relevant steps to protect those records. Be vigilant with email. I can't stress this enough. The single biggest vector for cybersecurity incidences and threats to most organizations is emails. Dental offices are particularly susceptible to this because you deal with the public, you deal with patients, you deal with other doctors, you deal with a lot of people, which means you're dealing with a lot of emails. Be vigilant with those emails. When in doubt, call people. We still have phones for a reason. Pick up the phone, call, and verify. Avoid clicking links that you don't know where they go to. And if you click a link in an unknown email, please do not supply any requested username or passwords until you confirm where they are. Same thing goes for the RCDSO emails. If you see an email and you think it's not us it seems to be coming from us, call us. We can confirm it or not. Or you can check with your email provider. They can look at things such as DKIM and DMARC and all those technical terms to confirm the sender of the message. But be vigilant when you're working with emails because that is one of the biggest single threats for most organizations. Don't store patient records on personal devices. I can't stress this enough. Personal devices are personal devices for a reason. The same personal device you will give to your teenager or child to play with or watch YouTube videos on should not be the same device that you keep your patient records on. They're patient records, and you need to keep them secure. You need to keep them confidential. So do not put them on personal devices if at all possible. Encryption. We spoke about encryption previously, but encryption is critically important as well. Make sure that anytime you're sending health information or highly sensitive information, make sure that it's encrypted. I do know that most of you hate the RCDSO's encrypted email system. I apologize, but it's required. And it's required both by the IPC as well as general cybersecurity best practices, because anything containing sensitive information must be encrypted when it's being transmitted. Now, in addition to this, there are other resources available after this session for you to go back and review and work with to help you deal with cybersecurity within your space. And some of those additional resources that are available to you are things such as the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. We spoke about that before. The NIST cybersecurity framework, that's the one that the RCDSO uses. There's a great website that goes through what is the framework, how to adapt to it. It has checklists for implementing cybersecurity within your space. A similar one is the CIS Critical Security Controls, very similar to NIST. It has a website, it has checklists, suggestions, it has draft and sample response plans. So another great resource. Our very own RCDSO's Practice Advisory Service. This is a resource for both dentists and the public. Reach out to us. When in doubt, reach out and we'll provide the information that we have available. There's Get CyberSafe Canada, another governmental website with some great tips and tricks, great cybersecurity training for staff as well as your families at home, because unfortunately we're in a very interconnected world, so you can't always separate your family and your professional environments. So it's good to have everybody aware of what's going on. And last but definitely not least, visit the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario's website. They have some great resources regarding cybersecurity in healthcare, and they're available for you to use and as a guide for you to move forward with. And with that, I'm at the end of my session, and so I'm going to end with a final Slido question, which is, what is one practical step you're going to take away to enhance cybersecurity in your office? And this is a word cloud. Just type in some of the things that you think you can do from this session or otherwise that could help to enhance cybersecurity within your office. Training? Absolutely. I'm so pleased to see training have as prominent a place because it is critically important. At the college, we do monthly training for everybody that has college technology, both staff, council, and otherwise, and it's proven very effective for us. I see password and encryption, absolutely. Audit, yes. Make sure that you're auditing your environment. Security and all things technology is constantly changing. So you don't want to sit there and have the technology become out of date just because you haven't changed it. Audit it, update it, keep it going. More staff training. Cyber resilience, I see that there, absolutely. It's important to do that. Change and reset passwords, yes. Think about passwords as a toothbrush. Again, it's critically important for you to do that. And it's easy for you to think of it within your own sphere of understanding. It's something you should do regularly. With that, I'm going to turn it back over. I'm seeing I'm at 36 minutes. So I'm going to turn it back over now and say thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to meet with you and speak with you today. And I look forward to this opportunity going forward. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Auldwin. In a moment, we're going to turn it over to our president, Dr. Sandhu, to give you a bit of a council update. But I want to just acknowledge that Auldwin is someone who provides our council and our committees and our staff with enormously useful advice and practical tips every single day about how we can all protect against those risks that are out there. And I hope that he's been able to bring some of that to you as well, because the principles and the actions are the same, whether it's the RCDSO or your dental practices. So thank you very much, Auldwin. That was extremely informative. We want to provide now an update on some work at council, and I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Sandhu for that update. Harinder?
Thank you, Dan, and good evening, everyone. It's great that you have joined us today. I wanted to share a brief update on our council meeting held last week. Council heard from Rainbow Health Ontario, whose mission is to help healthcare professionals better understand the 2SL LGBTQ+ community. They are now an approved sponsor for Category 1 education courses at the college. It is important for the profession to have a deeper understanding of our patients. It helps us to be better dentists. I encourage you to explore CE opportunities and Rainbow Health with Rainbow Health. You can find more information about this on the RCDSO website. Council also heard updates on the college strategic plan, including a presentation on our practice models and corporate dentistry project. Understanding the scope and context of business models in dentistry is important to regulation. For those of you who are interested, you can watch a recording of the council meeting on YouTube. Highlights of the meeting are also emailed to the profession and are posted on the RCDSO website. Over to Dan, to you.
Thank you, Harinder. Now, before we turn to our second presenter of the evening, you know from the previous session that we always try to get your opinions on various topics. You have your slido.com site open already, and you have the code 2516719 for those who may have joined late. And what we're going to do is start with some general questions that we can ask you before we turn it over to our non-council committee governance presentation. So the first question is this your first time attending an RCDSO Connect session? So pretty easy, yes or no, and we'll give it a little time for your responses. So lots of people are returning, which is great. So I'm seeing about 87 responses. Maybe we'll move on to the next question now, but keep answering if you've got Slido open, and we'll be able to record the final results. The second question then is, what topics are you interested in learning more about in our quarterly newsletter? So this is a word cloud, as you had previously, and we are always trying to capture the topics that are important to you in your practice or about the college, and trying to be as transparent as possible with all of the work that we are involved in and all of the decisions and deliberations of council. So CDCP is a very large word on the screen, which suggests that a lot of individuals are typing that into Slido. I also see practice management, senior care, jurisprudence, some clinical suggestions, public perception of dentist and dentistry, expanding duties of dental assistants, PLP. That's great. Thank you very much. And hopefully we were able to address some of those topics in the most recent newsletter that went out as well. So again, you can keep typing your words if you have that up on Slido, and we'll turn now to the next question. Are you interested in applying for a non-council committee appointment? A yes, a no, or a maybe. So lots of no's, about 51%, about 16% are yes, 33%, 32% are maybe. Not surprising, there's obviously all sorts of reasons why individuals will think about what they want to be doing in their professional part of their lives, and obviously working with the council is a commitment, and it is additional work on top of the things that you do every day. But it is really great to see that at this point, about 15% might be interested in applying for some of the non-council committee roles. Thank you. And our final question is, have you treated patients on the Canadian Dental Care Plan? And that would be in your practice since the program started back a few months ago. So quickly getting close to 100 responses with about 73% at yes. Hovering a little bit. And that's a really consistent result. If you sort of look at the data that's been provided about the percentage of dentists that are involved, the number of patients that have received care already. So after about almost 120 responses, hovering around 71, 72%, of dentists who are observing this evening who have treated patients on the Canadian Dental Care Plan. So again, you can continue to answer that. That's really fabulous that some of the responses that we've received this evening. And I want to turn now to introduce our next speaker. So as many of you know, this is a year where we have an election, and this is for the district elections of the RCDSO Council. Our application period closed in late September, and voting for the next council takes place in December. We also have our non-council committee appointment process that is underway, and applications are due on November the 11th. You can find more information on the application process and the eligibility requirements on our website and our social media channels. I'm going to turn it over now to Lara Thacker, the college's governance specialist, who will give a brief overview of how the non-council committee appointment process works. Lara will also discuss the type of work committee members are involved in. Lara.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to speak with you this evening about non-council committee member appointments. Tonight, I want to do three things. I want to help you understand what non-council committee members do and why their work is important. I want to discuss the type of work committee members are involved in and help you understand how non-council committee appointment process works. Next slide, please. So when we looked at the questions that came in through registration, a couple of registrants asked, what is a non-council committee member and non-council committee of what? So that's probably a good place to start. RCDSO, as you know, has a council. It's the board of directors. And in addition to council, the college has a number of committees. There are statutory committees like the ICR Committee and Registration Committee that are required in the legislation, the Regulated Health Professions Act, that have specific functions and authorities. But there are also standing committees that council has established in bylaw that are not mandated by the Act, but serve important functions in the operation of the college's programs and services. For example, our college has a finance, audit, and risk committee. Council provides oversight of the college's affairs and governs the dentistry profession in the public interest. Its duties include setting and monitoring the college's strategic direction, establishing bylaws, standards, and policies that shape the regulation of dentistry, and monitoring the effectiveness of the college's program areas. In contrast, committee makes policy recommendations to council. Policy issues or decisions need council approval. Often a committee member's role is to make individual regulatory decisions on case files related to dentists who are in their college's regulatory processes. So for example, on matters related to a dentist's conduct or competence. Committees are composed of different types of members, including professional members of council, public members of council, non-council committee members, and external subject matter experts. Tonight, we're going to focus on non-council committee members, RCDSO registrants who are not members of council and are who appointed to serve on the college's committees. Next slide, please. Non-council committee members play a very important role in protecting dental patients and serving the public interest. It's often said that this is where professional regulation is most alive, where dentists are able to bring their professional expertise and balance that with public input to make decisions that are in the public interest. We need your help. We need dentists with diverse skills and perspectives to help ensure that all Ontarians have access to safe, high-quality oral health care. This cycle, we are particularly encouraging applications from eligible registrants whose identities and voices have been underrepresented on committees, people who identify as First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, people who identify as members of the 2SLB LGBTQIA+ community, persons of African or Caribbean ancestry, Black identifying, Francophones, and individuals with disabilities. Non-council committee members serve on many committees, and serving as a non-council committee member is an important way for registrants to become involved in regulatory work. Very often, council members begin their involvement with college work first serving as a non-council committee member. Next slide, please. We are looking to fill roles on the following committees: increase complaints and reports, discipline, fitness to practice, registration, quality assurance, patient relations, and finance, audit, and risk. In the interest of time, I'll just touch on some this evening. The Increased Complaints and Reports Committee reviews dentist-specific concerns brought to the college's attention, such as formal complaints, mandatory reports, and information brought to the attention of the registrar. The Discipline Committee is responsible for hearing and determining allegations of professional misconduct or incompetence referred to it by the ICR Committee, and deciding if the allegations have been proven, and if so, what penalty is appropriate. Quality Assurance Committee develops and administers the QA program, which is designed to ensure the continuing competence of registrants, that they continue to provide care that's safe and effective and appropriate and ethical. And the Patient Relations Committee advises council about patient relations program and measures to help prevent and deal with sexual abuse of patients. Next slide, please. At this time, there's specific need for a few specific competencies. Those include experience dealing with trauma-informed investigations, deliberations, and adjudication. Those are sought on ICRC and the Discipline Committee. Experience dealing with professional boundaries and sexual abuse, ICRC Discipline Committee and Patient Relations. And experience in mental health and incapacity matters, again on ICRC and Fitness to Practice Committee. I'm told we're also looking for an orthodontist on ICRC, as well as a generalist or a specialist who does implants. Information about each committee's mandate, composition, competencies, and time commitment is available on our website to help you decide what type of work you'd like to become involved with and what you might be best suited to. The majority of non-council committee member openings are on the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee and the Discipline Committee. Next slide, please. The committee appointment process is underway. New applicants are required to complete the online orientation module. The module only takes about 45 minutes to complete, and it tells you information about the role, expectations, and duties of committee members. It provides insights into whether your interests, skills, and experience align with the college's public interest mandate. So it's a good investment of your time to review those requirements and that information before you take the time to complete the application. Candidates should also review eligibility requirements set out in bylaw. Eligibility requirements include conflict of interest provisions. So for example, if you're serving on the board of the Ontario Dental Association, that might be considered a conflict. And there's also a 3-year cooling off provision intended to allow registrants to distance themselves from professional advocacy work and to realign with the college's public protection mandate. Another eligibility question we sometimes get, and we heard from you, is does having a complaint or several complaints on my professional conduct record affect my ability to apply? Having conduct history does not necessarily mean that you're ineligible to serve. Sometimes being the subject of complaint does inspire a dentist to get involved in regulatory work. The experience has helped them see a positive impact of regulation on their practice and on improving quality of care for their patients. It really depends on specific eligibility requirements set out in our bylaws as to whether the conduct in question prevents you from being eligible. So if you do have a question about your conduct history or a conflict of interest question, or really anything to do with eligibility to serve on a committee, please reach out to us and send us an email, and we're happy to clarify. You should familiarize yourself with competencies required to perform effectively on the committee you're interested in working on. It is a competency-based application and selection process. Our application form is online. It's available on our website. In addition to specifying the committees you'd like to serve on, you're going to be asked to answer competency-based questions. There's also a voluntary diversity questionnaire you're encouraged to complete. You're also required to upload a copy of your CV and write a brief statement of interest about why you wish to serve and why you would make a good candidate. So you need to invest some time in demonstrating your knowledge and skills and articulating your lived experience to the governance committee so that they can match your skills with the appropriate committee. You must complete the orientation module and the application form by the deadline, which is Monday, November 11th at 9 a.m. And I would recommend that you set aside approximately 2 hours to complete the module and the application form. Next slide, please. The committee term is about 2 years, the same as for council members. The time commitment varies from committee to committee, and there's a detailed table on our website which sets out the time commitment for each committee. The ICRC has the most significant time requirement It also appoints the most people. We're working in mostly a virtual environment now. Some committee meetings are in person and hybrid, so that is intended to remove barriers and make the work more accessible for everyone. I'll also mention that there are per diems provided for participation in committee meetings, and that information can be found in bylaw. Next slide, please. In terms of the selection process, the Governance Committee will closely review each application, taking into consideration the terms of reference and committee competencies, diversity and representation, practice areas, a balance of experience, and inclusion of new perspectives on committees, as well as the needs of the committee. The Governance Committee will then select and present a recommended slate of committee members and chairs to Council for appointment, and the Council will consider and approve a slate of committee members and chairs in January. Applicants will be informed of the status of their application following the January meeting. We received a question: in a competency-based qualification process, how can a newly registered practitioner who wants to get involved with regulation of the profession improve their chances of getting selected so they can learn more experientially about governance and the regulation of health professionals in Ontario? This is a great question. We're always looking for ways to remove barriers to becoming involved in college work, including to new practitioners. I would encourage you to reflect on other volunteer experience, courses you've taken, and lived experience that may give you the knowledge, skills, perspective, and experience needed on colleges' committees. Look for opportunities and resources to enhance those skills that are desired on all committees: communication, conflict resolution, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Participate in college consultations. You can watch recordings of council meetings on our YouTube channel, review council materials posted on our website. They give important information about regulatory issues and policy information, and some recommended by committees that help govern the profession. We have spotlight sessions on our programs and committees and educational sessions for council members that can be very informative. So when you are ready to serve on a committee, you can reference and demonstrate the requisite knowledge and skill and experience you have to contribute to the college's work. Next slide, please. More information about eligibility requirements, committee competencies, time commitment, and application process can be found on our website and social media channels. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at elections@rcdso.org. Thank you for your time and attention this evening to learn about this opportunity, and I hope this has inspired you to become involved with this committee work, and I hope to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Lara. Yeah, thanks, Lara, very much. This college doesn't run without effective governance. And as you've heard, governance is not just the board. Governance is also the many committees that we have and the various ways that dentists can become involved. I know that I hear quite regularly from dentists who do become involved that they weren't quite sure what they were getting into. And they certainly almost all say that the work is interesting, it's engaging, and it's challenging. And they really do understand the mandate of the college much better after having been involved with us at a committee level. So as I thank Lara and Auldwin, we do have one more poll for you tonight. It'll be a quick poll, but we asked the question earlier, are you interested in applying for a non-council committee appointment? We had about close to 120 responses. For those who are still here waiting for the CE code, and the number of yeses, or the percentage of yeses, was about 15 or 16%. So we're asking the question again. We've got the Slido poll up, and we'll just give it a few seconds and see how you respond after hearing from Lara. So we're seeing about 79 or 80, just over 80, with about 15% yeses. So hovering around the same level. It is a big commitment, and it is a commitment in the application process, but as we know, well worth it. And certainly we will want to talk to anybody who has an interest and see whether it's a committee opportunity or any other type of opportunity to provide your expertise to the college in different ways. So folks, we've come to the end of the session. As always, if you have any practice-related questions, do not hesitate to reach out to the staff in the college's practice advisory service by email at practiceadvisory@rcdso.org. You can also follow the college on many of its social media sites, X, LinkedIn, and Instagram to receive our latest news, updates, and resources. We will be sending you an evaluation survey about this evening's session. It's short and will help us understand how we can make future RCDSO Connect events more valuable for you. If you were curious about this, by the end of 2024, we will have done 4 Connect webinars and 1 live event in London. And in 2025, we're planning for 6 virtual events and 1 live event. And that location is yet to be determined. So your feedback is extremely important so we can always design agendas that are serving your interests and information needs. So you can see the event code up on the screen, 2024-1029, and you can use this code when completing the survey to get your CE certificate for this evening's event. Our latest college newsletter arrived in your mailbox. I referenced it earlier in late September. I hope you'll take the opportunity to look at the rich information within it. There's some great information on the evolution of the NIHB program, responsible use of social media, and the roles of the RCDSO and the ODA, which is something that I know causes some confusion with both the public and the profession in terms of what these 2 organizations do. And lastly, we would appreciate your feedback on 2 open consultations on draft standards of practice that were presented to our council in late September. And the 2 standards are consent to treatment and prevention of boundary violations and sexual abuse. So you can scan the QR code on the screen to visit our website for more information. And you can also email our policy team at consultations@rcdso.org. As always, gathering your input and feedback is an important step in our standards development process. So we want to hear from you as you look at these drafts that have been presented to council, and we'll come back to council in a final form at a later date. Thank you once again for joining us today. Thank you to our speakers and all those who work behind the scenes. And on behalf of Dr. Harinder Sandhu, enjoy the rest of your evening.